Hey everyone, welcome back to WCB Jazz Vinyl. Today we're going to talk about the latest Blue Note Review Volume 3 box set titled Truly, Madly, Deeply, Morgan. Get it? So what we're going to dive into is what's included, but really I think more so than that, what do I think about each of the components within this box set? Do I think it's worthwhile release, etc. So before we dive in, as always, go ahead and hit like, hit subscribe. You can hit that notification bell if you like, and you can follow me on Instagram at what_can_brown. All right, so if I was a betting man, I would say that when this box set was announced and you heard that it was Volume 3, there's probably a lot of people out there that thought, wait, what happened to Volume 1 and 2? Or what is this? And so I kind of want to unpack that. And I think there's actually a couple of reasons for why that may be the case. So back in 2000 and I want to say 17, and I know that this is, we have a lot of new folks to this hobby in terms of collecting vinyls, in terms of collecting Blue Note. Back in 2017, Blue Note launched their review box set, and the very first one that they put out was called Peace, Love, and Fishing. And this is what that looked like. It's more or less, I would say, in honor of Wayne Shorter. I say more or less just because some of the components aren't necessarily distinctly about Wayne Shorter, but for the most part, that's what this was. And this was in, like I said, 2017. So cut to 2018. Well, they actually put out Volume 2. And this one was titled Spirit in Time, honoring the drummers of Blue Note. Say, mostly Art Blakey and who, like Joe Chambers and some others. So these were the two box sets that they put out. And then if you're kind of following me here on the timing, what happened in 2019, when everybody was waiting for this next box set, was that that Tone Poet was announced as a series. And guess what? The same person who was sort of mixing these, mastering the content on these box sets, as well as producing these box sets. Well, they seemed to divert their attention. I'm talking about Kevin Gray and Joe Harley, seemed to divert their attention towards the Tone Poet series. And all of a sudden, we didn't have another box set. And I think a lot of people thought maybe they're abandoning the whole idea, right, in favor of going through sort of Tone Poet, going to Tone Poet as a series. And the interesting thing, actually, I think, is that some of the releases that actually were included in these first box sets kind of gave us an idea of what to expect with Tone Poet, because I think they paid the same amount of attention to detail in terms of putting out some of the reissues, again, that are inserted in these box sets as they did with Tone Poet. So when Volume 3 was announced, again, I think it took a lot of people by surprise, and I think there's probably a lot of folks that maybe wish that they were able to get Volumes 1 and 2. But be that as it may, what we have now is the Lee Morgan set. That again was just put out, I think, a couple of weeks ago. So what I want to do is kind of dive into this in a little bit of detail. Now, what I don't want to do is just give you an unboxing, because actually Don Was, who's the president of Blue Note, just posted a YouTube video of an unboxing. It's like 5 minutes, right? Way more succinct than what I'm about to do. But he basically just shows you what is included in the box set, and I'm going to tell you about what I think about each of the things in the box set. All right, so first up, what does it look like? Well, here you can tell right here, this is what it looks like. And I think that they chose a beautiful image. I think that the design of this thing is great. These box sets are super, super sturdy. You can see right here, it says Blue Note Volume 3, and it very much matches the other two box sets, with the exception of the thickness of the box set. So this is probably the most streamlined, and it's not because it has the least content, but it certainly is the most streamlined. So if you see these two side by side, right? So you can tell that simply Volume 3 is thinner, but still the same material, same size and everything. And so obviously it's going to it's going to sort of match it on the shelves, if you will. So here, let me kind of show you, I guess, maybe some of the rest of this, and then I'll show you actually some of the components of it. So the box is blank on the back, and if I open this here really quickly, again, I've already taken all the contents out just for ease of me actually showing you this stuff. But you can see that they kind of have some sort of cut areas to insert some of the material. And they have this ribbon that allows you to pull it out a lot easier, because if they didn't have that, then you'd be digging in there with your fingernails. So that's what the box set looks like. And what's included here are really, let's see, how many pieces of music? So there's a reissue. There's a double disc of what I'll call modern recorded music. There's a CD that's the same as the double disc. There's a 10-inch record and there's a 7-inch record. So that means that there's actually 5 individual components of music in addition to some other things that we're going to get to here in just a second. And I want to revisit, or I want to visit each of these in turn. All right, I want to start with the centerpieces of this box set, and I actually think that there's 2 of them. But the first one that I want to talk about is Lee Morgan's Sonic Boom. So I mentioned that they included a reissue in this box set. So actually, in those first 2 box sets, we had reissues of Blue Mitchell's Step Lightly, we had Art Blakey's Africaine, we had Bobby Hutcherson's Patterns. And the reissue that they chose for this, honoring Lee Morgan, is Sonic Boom. Now, I know that there's a lot of folks who are really hoping, I think, that Sonic Boom was going to be a part of the Tone Poet series. The inclusion in this box set, to me, would suggest that it will not be part of the Tone Poet series, and it is limited to this box set. If you were going to try to get a copy of Sonic Boom otherwise, there aren't that many options, but there are some options out there. So one of them, and in fact, my copy of Sonic Boom that I've had up until this point, is the LT Series edition. And if you're patient with me, I'm going to be putting this up on eBay now that I have this other copy. So this is the first time it was released. It was actually in 1979 in the LT Series with this horrendous cover. The cover was indeed redone for the Japanese release in 1981. And the first time that we saw it with this cover that they chose here, was actually in 2003 for the US CD release. All that being said, this was recorded in April of 1967 and simply was not put out at that time period. It was shelved and obviously reissued much later. You know, if I'm thinking about other modern reissues, I actually don't think there's anything other than a Scorpio edition in 2009. I haven't had great luck with those Scorpio editions. I just don't think that they sounded very good, and I don't think that they used all analog sort of sources for it either. So let's kind of talk just a little bit. I'm not going to do, you know, song by song or anything like that. But I do want, just because there's so much content here in this box set, but let me just say that, you know, the lineup here, obviously it includes Lee Morgan as the leader. You also have David Fathead Newman. There's Cedar Walton, Ron Carter, and Billy Higgins. As far as the content on this record, there's 5 original tunes. And then there's the track "I'll Never Be the Same," which I actually don't recognize. Don't recognize either of the folks that are listed here as being the authors of that song, but it's possible that it's from a movie, or maybe it is something that I should know and it's just not coming to mind at the moment. But in any event, it's a lot of original material. And so, you know, this is not just, you know, say a shelf session of a bunch of covers. In fact, it is, you know, sort of a unique, you know, sort of artistic statement. And again, 1967, this is, I think this is a pretty good time period for Lee Morgan. He wasn't just doing, you know, sort of Sidewinder-esque type of commercial stuff. He was playing more introspective stuff as well. And I think that the music on this is fantastic. In fact, if I had to pick 2 tracks, I think the opener, Sneaky Pete, is fantastic. And then certainly the title track, Sonic Boom, is excellent as well. As far as the sound on this, you know, I mentioned that that it's Kevin Gray and Joe Harley produced, right? This sounds every bit as good as a regular Tone Poet release. Now, what I will say is that there's a few things that make you realize that it's not just a Tone Poet that they stuck in here. And one of the indicators is that it doesn't have a glossy cover, and the other is that it's not a gatefold. Now, you still do get the liner notes on the back. It still is 180 gram, and in fact, if you're looking at the the label here, you can also see that it kind of mimics the Tone Poet. It actually has the Liberty Records sort of address on it to sort of mimic the idea that, you know, if it was released in 1967 when it was supposed to be, that's the label that would be on it. All right, so moving along to the other centerpiece, then that is this double disc. This double disc album. And this is modern musicians playing more or less Lee Morgan tunes. And I'll get into that in just a second. One of the things that I want to start out with, though, is that I was biased in thinking that this was not going to be good. When I put together essentially a preview video, as soon as this was announced, I put out a preview video. I didn't have a copy in my hands, right? But I wanted to make a video to basically announce that this was coming. And I can't recall if I expressed any kind of, concern or, or anything like that about whether this was going to be a worthwhile component of this box set. But I definitely was thinking it in my head. And so I had reservations. And And I could not have been more incorrect with those reservations. This is fantastic, fantastic music right here. So to give you the lay of the land, there's 2 discs in here. And actually here, let me first just show you, so you can kind of see this sort of gold, text on the back. It has a great cover that's not the same as the front of the box set, but is similar. You've got liner notes and track listing on the inside as well. And there's 2 discs here, both 180 gram. But I will say there's only music on 1.5 sides, right? So side 4, side D is blank. Across those 1.5 sides, there's 8 tracks. Each are recorded, funnily enough, at a different studio. So this is not one cohesive album. In fact, each of the bands on each of the tracks are different. Again, mastered by Kevin Gray, produced by Joe Harley. As far as what those tracks are, so 7 of them are brand new recordings of either Lee Morgan tunes, or there's actually one that's just sort of associated with Lee and it appears on one of his albums. So that track is actually Dear Sir, which is a Wayne Shorter tune, and I believe it's on The Procrastinator, which is an album that was put out on Music Matters, and therefore probably will not be part of the Tone Poet series, but if you want to get a copy, you can find it on Music Matters. And otherwise, independent of that Wayne Shorter tune, so there's 3 total tracks on here from The Procrastinator, fantastic album. There's 2 from Search from the New Land, there's 1 from Candy, and there's 1 from Rump Roller. So that remaining track that I haven't referenced, I'm going to get into as I kind of tell you about each of the tracks on here. So, and then I'll tell you what I think about each of the tracks and how this thing sounds. So, firstly, track 1 is Mr. Kenyatta by Chief Atunde Ajua, who is a fantastic trumpet player. Listen to a lot of his music. I have some of his albums, and I highly encourage everyone to seek out his albums. So, Mr. Kenyatta, the track originally appeared on Search for the New Land. This track is fantastic. One of the highlights of this album. It's super moody. The bass is really rich and deep. Chief Atunde Ajua's trumpet, I would say, is not trying to be Lee Morgan, but it does. I think it plays especially well with his music. This is a very atmospheric piece, and I just think that that Ajua's trumpet just sounds fantastic. This isn't trying to be sort of a hard bop kind of thing. It is very modern, but sounds amazing. I would say it's an interpretation, right, of the track. In fact, I think a lot of these, they're interpretations of the track. They're not just copies. They're not just trying to replicate exactly what that original Lee Morgan composition was or tune was. So this one is taken actually at a slower pace, in fact, than the original, but it has electric piano in the instrumentation. Again, deep bass, minimal drums, but it really sounds fantastic. And I noted on here, because I think there's 2 or 3 tracks that were recorded by somebody who goes by Q Million, who I got to be honest, I wasn't familiar with, and it's probably because I'm not I don't pay as much attention to some of the modern music. And when I do, I'm not necessarily looking to see who recorded it, have to be honest. But Q Million has been nominated for Grammys multiple times, and he actually won for a Blue Note album as well, which was a Robert Glasper album from some years ago, I think. So that's the first tune. Second one features a Blue Note artist, so somebody who is currently signed with Blue Note, and that is the fantastic vibraphonist Joel Ross. Love his work, have his albums. You should definitely check him out as well. So he plays Dear Sir, which is that Wayne Shorter tune that appeared on The Procrastinator, which, by the way, well, I mentioned this earlier. So The Procrastinator just hasn't been revisited since 2012 by Music Matters. But that one is fantastic. Sounds great as well. In aid of speeding things along. So Bill Frisell plays the third track, which is the title track from Search from the New Land. So Bill Frisell, also a Blue Note artist. This is such an interesting arrangement of this tune that's very sort of guitar forward, which I think you'd expect, considering whose band it is. But this one sounds phenomenal as well. Here's the thing: these tracks don't just sound great for the music, even though the music is absolutely fantastic. The recording quality, like whoever recorded these tracks, and maybe it's because I'm not as familiar, or I'm not as used to hearing some of these tunes being recorded in like a modern setting, but my God, like this double disc is some of the best sounding music on my setup that I own, for sure. Like every single track is just so beautiful. It feels like it takes advantage of all of the components in ways that some of my vintage albums don't necessarily have the ability to do. So I was just completely blown away. Like just, I couldn't even get up from my seat until, obviously the side was done. I was just so amazed. Okay. So the next track is by, Kaon Harold. Is it, I think it's, here, sorry, I'm double checking. Yeah. Kaon Harold, who's a trumpet player. I believe he also signed with Blue Note. And, anyway, he plays a Stop Start, also a track from, The Procrastinator. This is a trumpet player who, he's a mentee of Charles Tolliver, and probably seems to have learned quite a bit, or picked up on some of his genius anyway. Otherwise, you may know Kaon Harold because he actually plays the trumpet part in that Miles Davis biopic titled Miles Ahead, which had Don Cheadle playing Miles Davis. So anytime Don Cheadle is playing, it's actually Kaon Harold who's doing it. He sounds phenomenal. The guitar sounds phenomenal here. There's a ton of energy. It's beautifully engineered, beautifully played. Highly, encourage everyone to check that out. And actually, I don't know to what extent some of these tracks are available for preview, but I'm not sure. So, all right, that was the first track on side B. The second one on side B is Desert Moonlight, and this is a track that's played by Derek Hodge. The piece was originally featured on Rump Roller. This is another one that was produced by Q Million, and it sounds correspondingly beautiful. There are light vocals on this track, but otherwise I would say it's very much a rhythmic, sort of drum feature. There's actually only bass, piano, keyboard, and 2 drummers on this. There's a little bit of a hip hop element as well. But I just find it very interesting that they decided to sort of tackle a Lee Morgan tune without a trumpet player in the lineup. So pretty ballsy anyway. All right. So side C, which is, again, remember the last side, what we have on here is actually the title track from The Procrastinator, and it is played by Artemis, the band that goes by Artemis. And this one features Ingrid Jensen on trumpet, and some different instrumentation than you'd expect, I think, for this type of tune, in that we have bass clarinet as well. All right. The next track, and really the last one of the modern pieces, is All the Way by Chris Botti. This was originally featured on Candy. And even though, I would say Chris Botti is more commonly associated with sort of the smoother modern jazz, and that is a little bit of the sound that you get here. He is the perfect choice to play such a somber ballad. I think he does an amazing job. For those of you who have listened to him, he likes to use echo. He does incorporate that here, but his tone is fantastic. The whole band is fantastic. And even though he has a little bit of echo, the other musicians are very sort of organic in sounding, very acoustic in sounding. And I think it sort of comes together very, very well. All right. So the very last piece, and the one I kind of hinted at, is actually a vintage track that is played by Lee Morgan and his band. So this was a alternate take of a track called Morgan the Pirate, which was a song on Search for the New Land. So because it's an alternate take and it's actually 16 seconds longer, you do get different solos, obviously, throughout. Obviously, it follows the same form if it's only basically 16 seconds longer. But, I think in this type of situation where we have an alternate track, you kind of get sort of exposes like a tiny bit of Lee Morgan's personality, maybe that we hadn't necessarily heard before, right? Because this is new content, I think, for a lot of people to be able to sort of absorb. Grant Green is on this track, obviously, as well. His solo sounds fantastic. In fact, all the musicians here sound fantastic. Just because it's an alternate track they didn't go with, there's no loss of energy here. It just sounds really good, and I think this piece could have found a good home on the album. It's just they went with a different take. All right, so really quick before we move on to the next item, this is the CD that is included that features all of this music. And I don't listen to CDs at home too much, but guess what? My car, which is a Jeep Wrangler, does have a CD player, and I will be playing this on my commute because that is how beautiful, absolutely beautiful this music is. Again, I was such a skeptic thinking, oh, it's going to be modern musicians who are going to play Lee Morgan tunes, but they have their own interpretations. Again, this is some of the most beautiful, beautiful music that I have heard. And it just reminds me, and I find this every so often, right? When I pick up like a Joel Ross record and I'm like blown away, it reminds me all of these amazing musicians who are, performing today and innovating today, and how great they can sound. And I think that this box set does a great job of bringing that to the forefront and kind of hitting us in the face for those of us who are who more often listen to older music. This is just a reminder of how great it can be. All right. So the next piece, second to last piece of musical content here. This is a 10-inch record, and this is titled Live Jam at the Gate of Horn, Chicago, Illinois. And then I love it says probably 1959 question mark. So this is I think a newly unearthed live date. Okay. The lineup on this album is Lee Morgan, Ira Sullivan, Nikki Hill, Bobby Timmons, Spanky DeBrest, and Philly Joe Jones. So what else to say about this in terms of content? There really is only 3 tracks, and then there's an introduction that is done by Philly Joe Jones, which actually I think the introduction is kind of fun because he recognizes a number of people in the audience, I think like Clifford Jordan, some others, and it's just kind of fun context to like put yourself in the mindset of like, oh, you're in a live, Chicago club, and you have a bunch of your peers in the audience who are watching you play, which probably was a little bit intimidating. So there's 3 tracks anyway that are included on here: Bye Bye Blackbird, A Night in Tunisia, and one that's simply titled The Theme. All right. So if there's going to be anything that's controversial about this box set, it's going to be this. So to explain, this is what I would call a bit raucous, a bit sloppy, and is just really poorly recorded. There's frequent distortion. You can't always hear each musician because of mic placement. In fact, that's pretty frequent that you can't hear each of the musicians. The audience is talking loudly throughout this recording. And there's areas where you're hard pressed to hear any musician, honestly. So in some ways, I would call this the complete opposite of audiophile. And so how might we interpret this? In a way, how might we defend Blue Note for this? But how might we interpret this? Does it have merit? I think is the question. So I have to be honest, I kind of struggle with this because obviously any document that we have of Lee Morgan in a live club from 1959 is a treasure for sure. And yet at the same time, you really have to be interested in that very fact, like the history of it, I think, like the importance of the document of music, all above the actual quality of the music. So, I will say I was fascinated to be able to hear it, but repeat listens, I might play it for others who come over, but will I listen to it repeatedly myself? Maybe not, but I am glad that I could hear it. And here's the thing. This is not what I'd call the central piece of the box set, and it's very much secondary. I'm personally of the opinion that one of the sort of joys of this box set is not just recognizing but celebrating some of the greats of the past and giving you context around their music and history around their music. And in that way, if you consider some of the other things that we have in this box set, right? We have ephemera. And you all know I love like jazz books. I love reading about jazz books, and I'm about to show you the booklet. You all know I love photography, and there's photos in here. We have a reissued album. We have modern musicians that are playing that musician's material. We have all these things that give you a more sort of 360-degree view of the musician. And in that way, in an aid of this sort of celebration of history that I think these box sets represent in each of these volumes, that's where I think it makes sense to include this, because this as an item that you would find on a shelf in a store should not probably be sold. And yet included in this box set, it just makes a little bit more sense. Like, it's probably one of the messiest recordings that you're ever going to hear in terms of like how good it sounds. And yet it gives you that window. It gives you just a little bit of like, I'm in a loud club and it's hard to hear the band, and you hear the audience, and in a way you almost feel like you're part of the audience. Even though I'm sure it sounded better live. So that's how I would characterize it. And I understand, to some degree that may sound like a defense for including it, but that is what I'm trying to like figure out in my head. And maybe and maybe how I process the inclusion of that 10-inch. All right, so the last piece of music that actually comes in this box set is this. So this is a 45 RPM single by Lee Morgan, obviously, and actually both of these sides are from the album Charisma, which was put out in 1967, I believe, recorded in 1966. Listen, I know that there's a lot of folks who actually have been hoping that Charisma is going to be included in the Tone Poet series, right? Maybe in the classic vinyl series, and it hasn't been yet. So there is some demand for this. Maybe rest assured that they didn't actually include the the album inside this box set, because if they did, maybe it wouldn't be available for those other series. But what they did include is this, like I said, this single. So on one side is the track "Sweet Honeybee," and on the other is "Hey Chico." I think that the sleeve that they actually designed for this single is pretty cool. Like, it's definitely inspired by the by the cover of the album. On this music, it's obviously Lee Morgan, but you also have Jackie McLean, Hank Mobley, Cedar Walton, Paul Chambers, and Billy Higgins. And this this single as well was mastered by Kevin Gray, obviously originally recorded by Rudy Van Gelder. And what the funny thing is that I put this on my turntable. And I have not, one thing I'll acknowledge is that with all of this new gear that I have, right, as of this year, I haven't really been listening to really any 45 singles, I would say. However, that being said, I was just completely blown away about how good this actually sounded. I think I was like used to hearing those vintage Blue Note singles, and they just always sounded kind of tinny and not as like dynamic and not as detailed. This right here sounds every bit as good as a 12-inch LP, or like, whether 33 or 45 RPM, it really sounds fantastic. So I was, here's the thing. I know it's still vinyl, right? There's no reason why it can't sound good. It's just that I haven't listened to a lot of modern singles. And so it was just very surprising to hear a modern made single sound just as fantastic as it does. Because like I said, for these two tracks, it's, it sounds just as good as like a Tone Poet. Now, I will say one of the things that's unfortunate is that, by honoring this sort of the tradition of the single, you can't fit that much content on any given side. Both of these tracks on the album are like 6.5 minutes, but as they appear on here, they're each like 3.5 minutes. So what you have is the fade out, right? Which would have been the same with the original single of this as well, because this wasn't made new just for this box set. This still is a reissue, right, of a single that was put out, all those years ago. Now, I know there's probably not a lot of folks out there who also collect singles or spin a lot of singles. And so one thing I did want to point out is that they actually included a 45 RPM adapter, right? I think you can see that, right? There it is. They actually included this adapter in the box set for you. So even if you're set up, you don't have, say, one of those, adapters that comes with your turntable, mine does, but these are kind of nice. And this is not the type that sticks inside the vinyl and you can never get out. This is one that you can easily set. You can set on the spindle, and you can put the record on it and take it right off. So I did think it was nice, just because not everybody who picks up this box set is necessarily also a 45 RPM collector. So just a couple more items to close out this box set. So firstly, in each of these, they include a booklet, and they included a booklet in this one as well. And I actually think this one is very nice, very informative. I've said before in some of my videos that I really like processing, ephemera, or like reading stuff or reading history or learning something. Obviously I'm going to pay attention to the music, but sometimes I'll listen while I'm reading, or sometimes I'll read after, or what have you. And so, more content, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So this has a number of essays in it, by some of Lee Morgan's contemporaries. I think actually some of his contemporaries, as well as some modern musicians. Yes, there's Randy Brecker, who provides, his thoughts. There's Chief Tunde Ajua, Marquise Hill. There's a bunch of folks in here who offer some comments. And this is, how many pages is it? It's like 27, 28 pages. So I think that there's I'll admit I haven't read all of this, but I really do like that they include all this additional content, right, to sort of support the box set and kind of, sort of tie a bow around it in terms of providing information. So also what we have is, which we had in the others as well, are lithographs. So here, let me show you and try to do this without like putting my oily fingers on it. So here, actually, let me show you this other one first. All right, so here's one of them that's included, right? lovely Francis Wolff photo of Lee Morgan, likely likely from a session. And actually, this is kind of cool. That would be Rudy Van Gelder's parents' living room, I believe, and you can kind of see the TV, right, and everything. And so that's kind of fun. Reminds you that yes, they did indeed record these the earliest sessions at Hackensack in essentially a living room. So the other one, I've seen this photo before, funnily enough, and I love that they included it because it's a great photo. So this is Lee Morgan again, and what you'll notice here, obviously he's kind of what do they call it, sort of cheesing for the camera. But what he's surrounded by, or in the background, are boxes and boxes. And what those boxes are actually Blue Note LPs. So I've seen a version of this. I don't know if you can actually see it on this, but I think I've seen like a high resolution photo, or maybe just a slightly different photo from the very same session online. And you can actually tell that these are, I don't know that they're necessarily his albums, but they are boxed up, presumably 1500 series Blue Note albums. And so I just think it's kind of a cool photo, especially for us collectors who sort of see this photo and dream of what's in those boxes. And could we run into this photo and grab a box and steal it? So anyway, that's kind of a fun one as well. So the very last thing that I wanted to point out that they include in each of the box sets is this sort of card, and it has the vibe of being handwritten. I believe it's printed, but it's just a message by Don Was, who's kind of joking about why it's taken them so long to actually put out Volume 3. And of course, you do get your number here as well, right? So it's limited pressing of 2000. This happens to be number 315. So that's the last thing that comes in this box set. All right, so, I suppose I better close with my sort of overall thoughts, right? So I've shown you kind of each of the items and kind of given you some of my opinion, right, on each of them, both bad and good. And listen, this box set is at a $225 price point, right? Plus tax, plus shipping. So, this is not a inexpensive item by any means. And, I think some people, what I've heard some people say when they consider this box set is they're like, why would I spend $225 for a reissue of Sonic Boom? And I think for those people who, see this box set and the only thing they value is Sonic Boom, then I'd agree with you. But that's just not my assessment. So when I, see this box, I see both of those two kind of, what I called sort of central pieces, right, of the box set. So the double disc and obviously Sonic Boom as well. And like I said, I was skeptical about that double disc and I was completely blown away by how good it is. So I look at this a little bit differently, but I think it still begs the question, is it worth the $225? Listen, this is very much in the sort of the eye of the beholder. I've already expressed that for me, being able to not only have some of this music, but have, the context around it, have the booklet, have some of the history, yes, there's a 10-inch recording that doesn't sound very good, but it's part of that picture. And, this is just it's a tough one. And one of the reasons why I say that is that I don't generally think about records that I buy in terms of whether I'm getting, my dollar's worth or whether the content exceeds my dollar's worth or underperforms. I don't, I think maybe part of this is sort of that element of privilege, right? Where, if you have disposable income and, you can put it into a box set and it's not necessarily going to, break the bank, and you're not necessarily going to feel the purchase too much. And obviously there is a bit of privilege there as well. But when I, consider this box set, I focus, I think, more on what you get rather than what you don't get. And I really like a lot of this. Content. I think they did a great job with it. I know that box sets aren't inexpensive to manufacture. And I obviously I don't know, right? I'm not even in the industry, but I can't imagine that the margin on this for Blue Note is that much more than anything else. In fact, it may even be less, right? Because sometimes these box sets, they put out as sort of prestige pieces, sort of pun intended, not meaning prestige the label, but prestige pieces that that get, brings more eyes, I think, on the rest of the material that Blue Note has, right? And Blue Note has a reputation for quality, and I think this is a quality box set. Again, they're not selling many of these. I can't imagine that there's high margins associated with this, given how expensive boxes are to produce and all of this content. So I don't look at it like that. That's not something that enters my mind in terms of my assessment either. I really, truly just think of this in terms of what is the content and did they do a good job with it? And I think they really did. And I think that there's a lot of folks who are going to overlook this, some of this music that was recorded by modern musicians and not consider it as important. But I'm really strongly giving you my opinion that additional content is, that double disc is just really fantastic. So, maybe I'm still in the honeymoon phase with this box set because I need to listen to some of the material a few more times and kind of process all of this stuff. But I think that Blue Note did a great job, and I sort of selfishly hoping that they did pretty well in sales, because I would love to see a volume 4, even if it means we have to wait another couple of years. So those are my comments about this box set. I'm curious because I haven't actually interacted with that many people who have picked a copy of this up. So I'm curious if any of you out there have, and if you have any thoughts as well about the music and some of the content that's in it. So I guess I'll leave you with that. Thanks everyone. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time.